Hi, my name is Stacey Bell Lynn. I spent 20 years working in local news, and 13 years ago, I married an NFL player turned coach, Anthony Lynn, and joined the world of NFL superwives. I've always loved hearing about the life behind the headlines. It's where you find the common thread that connects us. That's what I want to do here. My husband played and coached for the Broncos and 49ers. He's currently the running backs coordinator for the Commanders. We've moved 6 times across the country for his various jobs. When I first met my husband, I didn't know anything about football. I just loved the commercials and the snacks. Well, trust me, that's changed. In my new NFL world, the wives became my family and confidants. It is a sisterhood that transcends teams and rivalries. In each episode, I'll talk with a significant other of a player or coach, the football wives who hold it all together. We'll get real and give you a behind-the-scenes glimpse of it all. This is the world that I want to share with you. Welcome to Super Wives of the NFL, their inside stories. Let's kick it off. Hi, so I'm doing something a little different today. I'm joined by Hayley Elwood. Hayley is an NFL reporter, longtime NFL reporter. Hi, Hayley.
Hey, Stacey, how are you? Thanks for having me.
Thank you. We're going to talk a little bit later about, how we know each other. It goes back to the Chargers days, how long we've known each other and that kind of thing. But in talking to a lot of my friends, and I don't know if you knew this, but I knew nothing about football when, I first got involved with Anthony. And so I meet so many other of my friends and just people that I talk to who don't know anything about football, but they want to follow along because their guy is watching it, their dad watches it, their brother or whatever, or they just want to be in the conversation. So I thought it might be a good idea to try to talk about some of the games of the week or just some hot topics, to use a phrase, or just the fact that we're seeing more of an audience for women who are plugging into sports who don't have a knowledge about football. And I think that's really cool.
I think it's super cool. I mean, this, like back in 2019 at the Chargers, I had started a female-focused podcast, which at the time was the only one at the NFL club level. And it was just something that I kind of felt was, Erin Andrews has used this phrase with her clothing line, but there was like a blank space. There was sort of a need for it. And I think from 2019 to where we are now, the amount of female viewership and growth that the NFL has seen has just been absolutely incredible. And you and I were kind of talking before this whole thing got started. And, you mentioned your own personal story. I have friends, my hairstylist who I love and I've been with for the last 4 years, knew nothing about football when I started seeing her. And thanks to, you made the joke me, but also a little more probably Taylor Swift, is now a huge fan. And I think it's really important to continue having those conversations of bringing women into the conversation and making them feel wanted and making them feel appreciated within this space, but, without pandering to them because they can learn the game just like everyone else. And I think that's been kind of the coolest thing that we've seen, especially over the last, like I said, when I started in 2019, but, 4 or 5 years or so, just how much smarter and into the game women are. I mean, I just think it's awesome. And I'm super excited to be joining you and do this with you.
I'm glad you said that because we don't want to pander to people because you can learn it. Like I've learned a lot about it. I'm not probably as knowledgeable as you are, but I know what's going on now and I can talk about it.
Yeah. And I think that's the cool thing. And I think all of us, when I had first started working in the NFL and started working for the Chargers, was obviously a general football fan. And, I grew up in San Diego and had watched the team for all those years and whatnot. But there's so many intricacies that obviously you don't know and you don't learn, but then you kind of come along and bring yourself along. And I think the game is just always evolving, always changing. And there's never a bad time to join in and never a bad time to kind of join the party and see what it's about. And I think here we are in week 4, which is sort of, my math isn't great. And I know there's an extra game now, kind of still the quarter mark of the season, even though there's an extra week in there now. But come on in, the water's warm. You know what I mean? Like this is the best time to get involved.
I agree. Okay. So week 4, there's always storylines and I feel like it's still early in the season, but going into week 4, which kicks off Thursday, and we'll talk about the weekend games. What are some of the big stories to watch this weekend going into week 4?
So I think there are a couple key games on the schedule that might not even be, we'll talk about the Sunday night game, which is a big one, but let's talk about like Eagles at Bucks. You have 2 3-0 teams at this point that are going to go up against each other, and one of them is still going to be undefeated and the other one's going to suffer their first loss. And I think when you look at sort of also the fact that both of those teams are in the NFC in a conference game, I always think about these types of games. Pat Kerwin, who's on SiriusXM NFL radio, longtime former GM and NFL executive, he calls those types of games within conference wild card games right now, that you're almost playing a type of playoff wild card game, even though it's so early on in the season, because a game like that could have implications moving on down the road. Meaning, if the Eagles and the Buccaneers have the same schedule, or the same record at the end of the season, will whoever wins this game would bump them ahead potentially. And so you look at a game like this, and even though it is only week 4, it's a big one when you look at that. And I also think a lot of Kirk Morrison's a former linebacker and does a lot of media now. And he always talked about weeks 1 through 3 were the get to know you kind of weeks. And week 4 is when it shifts to, we know who you are. And I think we're going to start seeing that with a lot of teams. Now, there is a lot of like quarterback parity that's still kind of happening with unfortunate injuries here and there. But for some of these other teams, let's take a look at like Titans at Texans. Both of those teams are 0-3 going into this week, and also a big divisional game for them too. But how do we know, do those teams now kind of have a feel for each other and what is going to happen as those teams move on? We also have Jets at Dolphins, 2 0-3 teams. Someone's going to win and someone is still going to be 0-4 after this week.
So there's a lot of pressure. I'm sorry to interrupt, but there is a lot of pressure on these teams who are 0-3 going into week 4. And I think some of these you didn't expect to be 0-3, right?
I think you nailed it. And I think a lot of that also happening in the AFC is kind of a surprise as well, given the fact that I think over the last couple of years, you could have looked at the AFC as maybe the stronger conference compared to the NFC. You have more kind of star power at quarterback, if you will, these younger quarterbacks that are sort of on the rise. But you look at injuries to Joe Burrow and how that changes the complexity of the Cincinnati Bengals. You look at, here's another game, Ravens at Chiefs. Both of these teams are under 500. They are both 1-2, and one of those teams is going to get to 500 this week, and the other team is going to fall to 1-3. And I'm not sure either of those teams ever expected to be in that type of position to start the season, let alone going into the first quarter of the season. So as you said, that pressure is absolutely on heading into this week.
And you mentioned the Bucks and the Eagles. I think one of the sidebar storylines for that, because I'm really a backstory person, is the resurgence of, I guess you call it that, of Baker Mayfield, which if you're sitting around talking, like, that's another fun talking point, his history and how well he's doing now.
Absolutely. And I think he's one of those stories that you kind of can't help but root for him, depending on where he's gone, where he started to where he is now. He's also one of those players who, he's a phenomenal actor. If you want to talk about the sort of off-field prowess, his commercials, I know he used to do the Progressive commercials, and I know he's in a new one, Popeyes, maybe it is. He's phenomenal. And I'm so glad that Baker Mayfield is A, doing well in the NFL, but B, back on our TV in a pop culture kind of standpoint, because he's great. He reminds me, he's got that sort of like Peyton Manning-esque, like just ease to everything that he does, but he is a great one. And I think sometimes the Bucks, in my opinion, are a team that doesn't necessarily get a lot of credit, or you don't necessarily think of them off the top of your head as maybe a dark horse candidate in the NFC. And I think his relationship with Mike Evans, who to me is a future Hall of Fame player, with what he's done, and his, it's crazy that he's been in the league for as long as he has now, but that's sort of a dynamic duo that you don't necessarily think about off the top of your head. But when you kind of start to think, you're like, oh yeah, they're actually really good. And so that's a game that I think is just going to be a really, really good one. And in terms of what the Eagles do, I mean, they're a force, and they came back against the Rams last week and somehow got it done. And they won the Super Bowl last year, and they're still here to defend their title. And I kind of love that Jalen Hurts has sort of just been like, okay, yeah, the Super Bowl was great, but what's next, And that's kind of the mantra that a lot of people have.
then when they win, he's just so calm half the time.
Yeah,
We were at our game, and it's this big rivalry between the Commanders, the Eagles, and then the Eagles and the Rams, and people are watching the games on their phone at the end of
hmm
our game and just all into it, by the end of our game. So all of this crossover, that's always fun to watch too. But the big
absolutely.
game, I think, on Sunday is going to be Sunday night, right?
Mhm. Yeah, we mentioned it. We teased it a little bit, but you've got the Sunday night game of Packers at Cowboys, the Micah Parsons game, if you will. So much drama, flair for the dramatics in the offseason about what was going to happen there. And I think Green Bay honestly kind of shocked the world a little bit by doing what they did. This is a team that for many, many years never really made, well, I'll say this. They made splashes here and there. You think of Reggie White, you think of Charles Woodson, you think of them taking a chance on some of these free agent players. But those guys were free agents. This was a trade that they made happen. And I think when the opportunity presents itself to go out and get a player of Micah Parsons' caliber, you got to do it. And the fact that they gave up 2 first-round picks, whatever, in my opinion, that was a great move. And obviously they traded Kenny Clark to Dallas. But I think this is just going to be a really, really huge game. I believe CeeDee Lamb is dealing with an injury and may not play in this one, which absolutely, limits Dallas's offense. But I think the magnitude of this game, every network likes to pump their ratings and every network likes to send out the press releases on Monday morning. But I truly believe the viewership of this one is just going to be absolutely incredible. And you have the Packers at 2-1, who suffered kind of a bizarre loss to the Cleveland Browns last week, going up against the Cowboys at 1-2. And, we'll kind of see how this one goes. But the last time the Packers went to Dallas, it did not end well for the Cowboys in that playoff game a couple of
And
years ago. So
I
I
thought
think
that was
there's
a
a
playoff.
lot of fun things. And I think everyone's going to be really hyped up for this one.
And like for people who don't know, because I don't want to take for granted that everybody knows the backstory like we do, Micah Parsons, big time player, was with the
Mhm.
Cowboys. They traded him to Green Bay.
Yes.
Yeah, to Green Bay. And so this Sunday, Green Bay is going into Dallas to play his former team. So lots of storylines, lots of
Mhm.
emotion, lots of intensity, just a lot going on there.
A ton. And I think this is another, as I kind of talked about, one of those wild card games. Both of these teams are in the NFC, not the same division, but the same conference. And this is one of those games that towards the end of the year could have playoff implications that you'd want to, you want to win your conference games. That's the biggest thing. You want to win your divisional games because that's your easiest road to the playoffs if you win your division at the end of the year. But then you also want to win those conference games because the way that the playoffs get seeded, which is how teams end up, being placed to play each other in the playoffs, the better you do, the better chance you have to go up against a lesser team. So you want to win these games right now, even though, as we said, it's only week 4.
You're right. It's still early, but there is a lot on the line
Yep.
already. Okay. Haley, I think this was good. Thank you so much. We're going to do more of these. I want to try to do it every week. It's so new. I don't even have a name for it,
Yeah.
but I'm going to ask people at some point to give me some questions if there's anything they want to ask you, because your football knowledge is just off the charts. So, but we just want to try to let people who maybe don't know the game and maybe people who know the game feel like
Mhm.
there's a space for you to ask questions and give your input. And I like what you said earlier, week 4, jump in, the water is warm.
Yeah. No, I'm happy to. I love it. I think it's great.
Okay, thanks for listening, and thanks in advance for liking this podcast and leaving a review. Meet you here next week.